We are the Billings Area Family Violence Task Force. We are a group of concerned citizens that were and professionals, and we do coordination of community resources and also provide education to providers, service providers, and the general public. And that is usually by the conference every year. Um, this year it'll be actually September 25th and 26th. We've incorporated Zoom into it so we can do, for those that can't travel to Billings, we do have that available now, and we usually start putting stuff up in probably around June, sometimes July, when we start, advertising more about the conference and what's going on. Um, Basically, we were formed out of the triple homicide of Isabel McGuire and her two young daughters, Catherine and Jennifer, which happened, they estimated on December 2nd, 1989. And Dr. Isabel McGuire's first husband, Dr. Brian McGuire, he went to a lot of different personnel, other doctors and personnel in the hospital. At that time, it was considered Deaconess, not Billings Clinic, and said, how could this have happened? What happened? And what can we do about it? And out of that, the task force was formed. And so what was it, May of 1990. And then we became later on, we're a nonprofit 501(c) organization. And our main parts of the task force is to provide, education through our speakers bureau, the Anna McGuire Conference. We also have available and we just put it onto our website, which is our handbook. I'm just going to hold that up. It's probably backwards, but it's a guide that's just kind of gives around for Billings and surrounding areas and stuff like that. But it's always a good resource for individuals that are in a domestic violence situation. We also have this very small little foldable, is we can call it our pocket guide. This is perfect. Hospitals use it, our hospitals, both hospitals, different organizations. If somebody's in a domestic violence situation, it's easier to hide this than our handbook. And the handbook is actually a lot smaller than what it used to be. It actually used to be regular 8.5 by 11. And we had started thinking, well, women can't put that in their purses. And now people don't put, usually women don't have a purse. They might have just like a little side bag or something. So that's why we came up with the pocket guide. And it's just a great resource, like with the pocket guide, just to give you an idea of the types of violence, how to go about getting an order of protection, what the offense of stalking is, what happens after the arrest, children who are abused, things like that. It has a few numbers on the back, which is, of course, kind of more incorporated around Billings area, but this is always something that anybody can go ahead and put together for your areas, is to go ahead and make one of these. We do plan on putting this also on the website. So when we do that way, when we have it, you can see what it looks like. It's just, very small. It folds up, sorry. I keep my background screen. I keep losing it. At least my cat's not coming in, so we don't have to worry about that. But it's a good thing to have. It's small. It's something you can put in your pocket, in a smaller purse. So our last conference was on secondary trauma. And because we all know when you're working with individuals like Chelsea, she works for Child and Family Services. So she's dealing with a lot of issues. And I think, who was it down on our panel here, that one of you is a therapist or something, or a counselor here? So dealing with and listening to other people's issues, domestic violence issues or whatever issues can cause a secondary trauma. Um, and so this is how we started. This was, Billings man kills his family and himself. And let's see, let me go to the next one. Catherine was age 5 and Jennifer was age 4. They were shot multiple times, as well as Isabel, by her second husband, who was also a doctor at Deaconess. All three doctors were anesthesiologists. And it's interesting, and I'm not going to go through, I mean, I'm just going to blip through some of these. This was the obituaries that they had in there. Um, we just, like I said, this is from our conference that we just did. But it was just interesting. And so I made it a little bit more personal because, you see things and people forget that these were human beings, that, oh, it's a tragedy. But it's like Isabel liked to ride horses. Catherine enjoyed riding her bicycle. Jennifer enjoyed dancing, things like that. What's interesting is that they did link, it looks like there was some possible drugs involved. Dr. Dennis committed suicide by carbon monoxide poisoning in his vehicle. And look, when you go in time, going back to 1989, the titles of these stories that the Gazette had, Slayer had a history of wife abuse. It's like, okay. And it comes to find out that going here within a matter of 5 days from the first report that the Billings Gazette did to, from December 5th to here, they had put together a profile of him, and it's quite extensive. And let's see, Isabel was his fourth wife. And let me see, let me keep going up here. His first wife was named Carol, and she was with him for 16 years. She did try to leave him, but she had said that because in that timeline, back in the 70s and whatnot, you just didn't leave your husband. You just did not leave the relationship. And sometimes pressures from, depending on your religion, that can be another factor why people don't go. Things are slowly changing, but it's still pretty scary. Some of these slides, I think with the recording, you'll be able to read a little bit of it. But he was starting to become paranoid. He moved to Alaska where there was, he tried to sue the hospital there, several other doctors. As you can see, one doctor actually left Fairbanks for a while as he feared for his well-being. A federal judge had to put a restraining order on him because of the fact that he had threatened to kill these people. And what's interesting and sad at the same time is that he had gone through all these positions and done all of this at different facilities throughout the United States, Kansas City, New Orleans, all of that, to make it to Alaska to be the head of the department there and then make it to Billings. And it's like, why the history didn't follow him. Um, which was a little bit strange, I felt, finding all of this about him because I'd always known a little bit of the background, but then when I put this slideshow together, I really was like, wow. But, Fairbanks, let's see, I think, um, let's see, granted privileges in 1983 at Billings Deaconess Center. He married his second wife in 1985. You can see that they were married from March to May, and she felt lucky to get out alive. In September of 1985, his third wife, she fled in November. So we're looking at 2 months, and that was after she was beaten, severely by him. And so she fled with her two children. And then from Isabel, 1988 until he murdered her in December of 1989, as well as the girls. And it was because he felt that she was going to leave him. And my understanding was that she was filing for divorce. So, and that's something that has been kind of a statistic that they have found is that the abuse can get more progressive as it goes on. So, look at my thing here. I want to make sure I'm not going to run out of time. Okay, we're doing good. Because I talk fast and then I'm like, oh, anyways. So they have found that an abuser it starts kind of small, but then each relationship, it can get more progressive. So, let me go here real quick. This gentleman, let's see, right here. This is a paralegal who was working towards becoming an attorney in Billings. And he dated a very good friend of mine. And he currently is up for parole again next week. And he it's really hard for, to see this because the things that he did to her, and I asked her and she did a brave thing getting up there to speak at the conference because she has tried not to relive it, but then it's helped her to talk about it, which can be very hard for any victim, until they feel comfortable that they can share their story. But he punched her, hit her, held a steak knife to her throat, he did put a gun in her mouth. He put a bullet and, said that he was going to kill her daughters in front of her, if she were to report anything. So luckily, a person walking by his apartment, had heard Maria screaming and was able to call 911. And as you can see, he was held on charges of 2 counts of felony assault with a weapon, felony intimidation, tampering with the witness, as well as a misdemeanor partner family member assault. His bond was set at 100,000. And he represented himself during trial. And there's that old saying that, only a fool represents themselves. And he kept firing everybody. He did finally, have someone represent him. And I want to get further to that screen because right here, this was the person who he ended up allowing them to defend him. Penny Strong, who ended up defending him, made the statement that I suffered no physical injuries during the attack. She did. The black and white photos sadly just don't show enough. The swelling, the bruising, everything, the fear, the intimidation, you know, and it's like there's the mental aspect of it as well, because when we go through a situation, as anyone will tell you if they have, that the emotional trauma that it can put on you, it's not the physical, because the battered women's groups that I used to do many, many years ago, the women would tell me repeatedly that the bruises go away, but it's the constant mental badgering, the psychological, the emotional, everything, that they just couldn't handle it. So as you can see, James Archie Patrick, he is to reappear. His parole was denied. This was back in 2020. And it was supposed to have happened on the 11th, but they moved it to the 18th, so next Tuesday. He will be up again, and Maria is writing her letter and will present to the board as well as her daughters, because they feared for their lives as well, seeing what their mother went through. So I guess this is part of the reason why I'm so passionate about the task force, and this is my 30th year on the task force. So been a long time, and it's things like this and people that just make you, you know, believe that we still need to educate, we need to get out there, we need to talk to people. It's not going to go away until we make it not okay. There's still the belief that what happens in my home, these are hope cards, by the way. You can go there. Maria, these were things that she had added to this presentation. But until we let people know that it's not okay, because there is still that mentality. What I was going to say is that what happens in our home stays in our home, and we can't do that. We just can't do that. And I know with, human trafficking, because we are right in that triangle between Seattle, Chicago, and Denver. Montana is a big hub for it. But I think the thing with human trafficking is that a lot of times it can start out from domestic violence, family violence within the home. I went to a training that the Human Trafficking Task Force here had, and one of the women that was part of their panel had actually been trafficked by her father. So there was abuse in the home, which turned into selling her to friends, and he was a pastor. So turned around doing that, which when she got to a certain age was like, well, you're too old for these men, therefore we're going to go ahead and put you into pornography. And so there's, when you look at that, it can start very young, and it can start within the home and then just expand into so many different areas. So let me see one more thing. This is the Montana Fatality Report from 2021. COVID had derailed them for a little bit, and I haven't checked this year to see if they've done it, because they do it every 2 years. So they would have taken, I believe, 2023 and then do all their findings. And so either there might be a new one out, or they're coming out with another one if they have. But you can just see from 2000 to 2021, there were 248 domestic related homicides in Montana. 33 of those alone were in Billings, Montana. 13 were youth. And let's see, in 2016, 24 alone. Let's see, primary victims are female, methods are firearms. On the Montana DOJ Fatality Review, they also have a Native American Fatality Review report. And those individuals are included in that 248, but you can go in and they have some wonderful information on that, primary method of how they were killed. And then this was the 2023 report in Billings alone. I'm going to see this thing I need to move. There we go. I'm going to push that off to the side. So aggravated assaults, 40%, which was 284 of the charges, assault with a weapon. You move down to 19%, which was 135. That was partner family member assault with strangulation involved. And then you move on over to 13%, which was partner family member assault. There were 93 of those offenses. Then you go over to the other side. You have partner family member assault, so PIFMA, 52%. Okay, and this is just for Billings alone, 52%, 798 reports. And then you keep moving along, and then you go down to this little tiny 2% for stalking, 33. Well, stalking is a form of family violence, domestic violence as well, because cyber, technology, that's one of the latest ways to now start to taunt, an individual that may have been in a relationship with you. So, and I'm not very good at this, guys. I'm really sorry. This is why I'm letting Chelsea, take over this part later in the year, because I'm just not that good. But types of family violence: you have your physical violence, your sexual abuse, your emotional, your verbal, your economic, your psychological, and your technological abuse. So, and that usually can come in the form of stalking, because social media, the problem with social media is that people put a lot of their lives out there and don't think to limit, they just have an open face, and anybody's welcome to jump on and do something. And so that's how individuals, sometimes get stalked. Not saying that's how they all get stalked, but we do have a reporter here in Billings on one of the news stations that was stalked. And I came out of, I believe, her being in the media. Well, what we have right now is the YWCA, which is the Yellowstone Women's Center. They have a couple of new big apartment type complexes for families to come into. Their old home is actually the original Gateway Horizon home is going to become the Family Justice Center, which is the Northern Lights. I don't know if you guys have heard that. I do share some of their stuff sometimes when they post on Facebook, but they're still in the building phase of things. Funding, as you know, right now is an issue because money has been frozen. With the Office of, let's see, OVM, the OVM Office of Violence Against Women. I know that when I went to the DOJ's website, I could not pull up that website. But if you were actually to type in the office on women against, whatever, sorry, I've totally lost the whole what. Chelsea, do you know what it is? It's the Office of Women OVW.
I don't off the top of my head.
Yeah,
But I
but
do know that, yeah, I think the most important thing is in terms of like our domestic violence shelters here in Billings is that if people need that assistance, they need to be contacting the YWCA, getting screened, and then seeing what support the YWCA has to offer. I often have clients that need help. But if the shelter is full or there's any issues, they have to keep calling. And so sometimes that does present an issue. Um, and so I would say that I wish there was more resources. We're kind of limited over here. I think people think that Billings is like the land of milk and honey of resources, but essentially there isn't a ton. And then with some of the funding being frozen right now, that has also presented an issue.
yeah, because our funding, as the task force alone, we're just a 501(c). So our only funding that we get is through our conference. So if we have a surplus, we have extra money, and we will turn around and we will donate some of that money to like Angela's Piazza, to the Y. We just, gave some monies to the Family Justice Center to help them, for visual, for printing purposes, to get their word out and whatever they need to do. But no, I have looked because on domesticshelters.org, um, you can get information from different shelters. And so I have seen what they have up in Park County and Gallatin and stuff, but no, we haven't collaborated with anybody, but we're always looking to be able to expand on our resources. So the handbook that we do is specifically for like Billings and surroundings. So that might be Carbon County, just, maybe like Roundup, Mussel Shell, all of that. But I believe that, we can learn to expand so we can put the other shelters and other things on there. Because I think that would be beneficial to kind of make it not only local and surrounding, but statewide. So that'll be kind of probably one of our goals that we'll start working
I
on.
believe Richland County Domestic Violence is the closest domestic violence organization to us.
Which one is that?
The Richland County
Oh, Richland County? Okay.
City. Yeah. And I don't know her contact, what her name. Anyway, the problem that's been for our small rural areas is you can't, and I've heard this in other places, you can't really put the shelters because you want the shelters to have anonymity. You don't want
Mm-hmm.
the addresses known because if perpetrators know where to look.
Right.
And then unfortunately, and then on top of that, our anonymity in our communities is zero. Like everybody knows everybody. So
Yeah.
there's been quite a few domestic violence incidents here, and there's no shelters. I think the nearest shelter was Culbertson, which can be
Mhm.
quite a drive in certain weather. And
Right.
if you don't have transportation, or if you have children who have school the next day, so like that's a huge disruption driving back and forth. And then again, it comes down to anonymity. Like by the next day, everybody knows a story of what happened,
Mhm.
Uh,
So we've
I
tried
just
to
want
get,
to, oh, sorry.
yeah, go ahead.
I just want
Since
to
you
chime
got
in here
a,
real quick because I have to get off of here. I think you bring up some really valid points. I think the task force has really decreased in size when after COVID and all of that. And so it would be really helpful to kind of, I guess, collaborate around the state and hopefully maybe I guess grow in members to kind of assist in I think reaching these other areas. I'd also like to add that people are forgetting that domestic violence is very real. And I think that in our state, human trafficking has really grown, right? Like everybody's so worried about human trafficking, but which is obviously a big problem. However, people forget that domestic violence is also a problem and those two go hand in hand. And so I do think if there are other ways for people to attend our meetings and have ideas, or, even join the task force, we would be open to that. But I have to jump onto this other meeting, but I am really glad to be here today. Lisa can share with you my email, if anybody has any questions, or you can email the task force, whatever works for you.
Thank you,
Thanks, Chelsea.
Chelsea.
Thanks.
So going back to what you were saying, rural Montana is one of the biggest issues, because the fact that towns are smaller, shelters are not available, driving 2 to 4 hours to find, some source where a person can go, that is definitely an issue.